The God of the Bible is a God who speaks, and I love that he speaks because it tells us that he loves to encounter people. He loves to be personal and up close with us. And so I created a couple of videos over the last 2 weeks on my channel about different ways that God speaks. Last week, I focused on the audible voice of God, inner voice and conscience, intuition, perceptions and impressions, mental pictures, and people in prophecy. In this video, I'm going to share just a few stories about God speaking in mental pictures and the outcome of that to encourage you. Now, sometimes when I close my eyes, I will see flashes of pictures that come into my mind's eye. They are not always the voice of God speaking to me, but they can be a way that God speaks. And so I want to just encourage you with a couple of stories. Many years ago, when I was learning about hearing God's voice, I learned about this very thing, that sometimes we can see things in our mind's eye. So think about Jesus seeing Nathanael under the fig tree. And when he told Nathanael that he saw him under the fig tree, it caused Nathanael to declare that he was Messiah. It was pretty incredible. Now, I don't have pictures like that. I'm not equating myself to Jesus at all. But I'm just saying that that particular scripture gives validity to the fact that we can see things in our mind's eye, that God will show us things ahead of time because Jesus came to show us the way to the Father. He showed us what relationship was like with the Father. Okay, so many years ago when I was learning about hearing God's voice, I learned about this, and they encouraged us to take some time to just pray and see what God might show us. And one evening I was actually practicing what I had been learning, and I was praying for my friend who was next to me. And I saw this picture. The picture that I had was actually of a plant. And this plant was in a small pot. And then it grew and it needed to be uprooted and it needed to go into a bigger pot. And then it grew again and it needed to be uprooted and go into a bigger pot. I saw it happen 3 times. And as I was sitting there praying, I felt like what God was telling me was that my friend was actually going to outgrow where she was in terms of what she was doing for work, and that God was going to uproot her, and that she was going to need to go somewhere else where she would grow. Now, I didn't know that this was actually going to literally come to pass. I just thought that it was an encouragement that, there were going to be seasons through which God was going to be working with her. Well, it turned out that God did exactly that over the next, I think it was 6 or 7 years. And it ended up being, even though it was just a flash of a picture for me, and even though I gave it to her as what I felt like was a very simple encouragement, for her, it ended up being this amazing, amazing thing that she relied on as this happened, because it wasn't always comfortable being uprooted. But when it happened, she kind of went back to that word that I had given her and was like, okay, this just might be God. Okay, let me give you another example. This is a much more recent one. I have the privilege of ministering to people in Iran, and I do it through satellite television, and I also do it through Zoom training with different people who are in their church. And so I was asked to do a biblical dream interpretation workshop for their youth and also for their adults, actually exploring the world of dreams and visions, not just dreams. And so I'm giving a biblical foundation for that. And in engaging in particular with the youth, I was asking God for ways that I could encourage them, ways that I could help them to see dreams and visions and symbol and metaphor, because that's how God speaks in the Bible, through dreams and visions. They're symbolic and they're metaphorical. Visions will point to literal events in the scriptures, but they still are full of symbols. And so as I was praying one day, I just had this flash of a picture come into my mind about some youth in Denver at a church that I love, Bridgeway Church. And I just saw the youth kind of painting paintings as encouragement for these young, beautiful Iranian youth. And so, I wasn't 100% sure that it was God, but I thought, well, okay, I know that God speaks in mental pictures sometimes, so I'm just going to reach out to the youth pastor and see what might happen. So when I reached out to the youth pastor, he was actually really excited about it. And he decided to talk to some of his youth. And I got actually 3 different paintings. I'm going to show you one of them. This is one that was sent to me for the Iranian youth. And what this young man saw was this lamppost in, just light coming from a very simple lamppost in the darkness of, a lot of what Iran is, but bringing the light of Jesus to these youth. And as I shared the painting with them, I did end up sharing what the artist wrote about it. But before that, I just was explaining to them, hey, what do you see in it? What do you see in the symbols that are in this painting? And it was so beautiful as they were so encouraged about them being light in the darkness. And that was, this isn't, an extravagant painting, but it is a beautiful painting. And it was speaking volumes to these young people. And it was so cool to see the chat in the Zoom just light up with things that were coming to people's hearts. So, very simple mental picture. One more quick one. I spoke at a Jesus Our Bridegroom King conference in Denver not too long ago. And as I was praying for that one, I had another flash of a mental picture. And I saw this woman whose name is Aliona Isakova just flash before my eyes. And she has this beautiful artwork all on the Song of Solomon. And so I reached out to the women's pastor because I felt like the picture was about possibly having her art at the conference. And the pastor was so excited about this idea. They ended up setting up an entire room, which they just called an encounter space, where all these paintings from the Song of Solomon were. Actually, they're not paintings, they're sketches. But this beautiful, stunning artwork. And the women of the conference would go in and they were just being so ministered to by Jesus through this art. And that happened because I had a mental picture, I followed up on it, and the pastor felt like it truly was from God. So again, not everything that we see as a flash in our mind's eye is going to be God, but sometimes it is. And I just want to encourage you to take baby steps towards what you might see if this is something that God does with you, and see what happens. Okay. As I promised, I'm going to go ahead and link to another video for 5 ways that God speaks to and encounters his people. I'm going to share some stuff from the Bible. I'm also going to share some personal stories in that video. And I'm just going to lead you through a short time of prayer and meditation about these things. And I pray that it really encourages you to think about this God who speaks.